Good morning, everyone. Today is day 19 of the 21 days to unraveling the ego's grip. And one of the pieces of this is when we're seeking outside validation. We've all done it. We're actually encouraged to do it. Even in many books, even relationship books, there's very much espoused there, even in songs, about realistically getting outside validation. Hey, Christine. Outside validation from others. And it's become so, talk about its own pandemic. We don't even know we're doing it. That's how the ego works. Again, a lot of things can sound really reasonable, can sound, oh, right, yeah, beneficial. And yet, if you always go back to the emotion and how do I feel, then you have a clue into what's going on for you. So seeking outside validation is really really simple. It's simple and it's complex. What am I saying? It's when you notice that if you need someone else to say something to you for you to feel okay, we're enculturated to do this. That's when you know the ego's got a grip on you. And again, how do you know? You go into the feeling place of it. It's really fascinating to me in my own life. Whenever I am really detached from stuff, and I'm not even always aware that I'm detached, I always get the very things that I've grasped for forever. Like I grasp for this thing. So I get that sort of like, this was always the thing for me with my husband. I'm like, he needs to apologize. And I could get a million people to agree with me. He needs to apologize. But when I'm in the grasping of, he needs to apologize, it's its own trap. And ironically, whenever I'm really detached from something like that, I get it. I get the apology. And I'm like, oh my God, that's funny. I don't even care now. But anything like that's one of the best examples that I can think of. Even this is another sort of sneakier, subtle way it can show up is if you've had, say, a disagreement with someone or an altercation and you're sort of the at-fault person, and if you need them to forgive you for you to feel okay, that's actually this very subtle way that we're seeking outside validation. Sometimes, we hurt people and they're nowhere near ready to bring, to be forgiving, and maybe they never are. There's always that. That's their own journey in their own way, but that's not necessarily an easy thing to separate from, especially in our culture. So the key here is always go back to the feelings. Like, how am I feeling about this? Like, if I need this person to say this to me for me to be okay. The other thing you notice is when you do get a compliment or if somebody does validate you, is to notice, because that can feel really good, but notice how how good that feels to you, how attached you are to that. It's that when our emotions are tied to anything, I see this with various people in my life. I see it in myself. But if your emotions are tied to something like, if this happens, I'll be okay, then we're seeking outside validation. If this comes through for me, like if this job comes through for me, I'll be okay. And again, in our current times, you can be like, no, seriously, I'll be okay because then I'll have income. And if I don't get that income, oh my God. But and there's nothing wrong with that, but just notice when we're so attached to something and attached to that, it's just you want to soften the attachment a little bit. And again, the other key here is to not beat yourself up for it. It's so huge. That's the cornerstone of everything. If you're like, wow, if you can start to just go in observation mode and go, oh, wow, interesting, I'm seeking outside validation. That sort of softens it. You may not believe that right away, but it's softening it. And anytime we soften it, we're better able to start detaching from something. So just think about, we're going to tap anything. It can be in the outer world. Sorry, just got a hair in my mouth. It can be with a loved one. It can be with anything like that you're like, oh wow, if that happens, I'll be better. And let's just tap, karate chop. Even though there's times I can seek outside validation, and I'm not always aware of that. But I know it's activated by how I'm feeling and my attachment to it. I choose to honor my feelings now. Even though I'm enculturated to seek outside validation, I choose to acknowledge these feelings now. Even though I can really seek outside validation, and I don't always catch it. Maybe a lot I don't catch it. And that's okay too. Anything that can help me judge myself less is likely really good for me. I can seek outside validation. Who doesn't in this world we live in? If you're in a body having this human experience, it's pretty likely this happens. So what if I could just go into detective mode now? Observation mode. Just start to notice all the ways this sneaks in on me. If I need someone else to behave a certain way for me to feel okay, that's outside myself. And I don't want to judge myself for doing this, because it would be pretty impossible to live in this culture and not do this. But as I start to notice it, that's when I can become more empowered. Just even in the noticing. If I'm attached to a particular outcome, that's actually outside validation. And of course, not judge myself for this. Just begin to notice it. And then use whatever tools can help me to soften that more and more. And then I'll find I have these moments where I'm less attached to particular outcomes. I'm less in need of things outside myself. Being a certain way for me to be okay. And as I soften that more and more, I notice I'm less and less attached. And I go inward more and more. What do I think? What do I feel? What do I need? And that can make all the difference. So take a breath. Just a couple other little things about this. I was listening to someone the other day, and I was noticing somebody I really like and respect, and this is true for all of us. Hey, Dawn. Hey, Kim. I was listening to what they were saying to someone on this call, and I was like, oh my God, I really disagree with this. Like, I really disagree with this. I was like, whoa, I don't think that's right at all. And why I think that's important is because I grew up, anyone in any sort of position of authority, whatever that is, like they're always right. They're always right. And that's how I know things are continuing to change for me, is that I can formulate my own opinions about stuff independent. I can hear authority figures talking now and be like, yeah, I don't think I agree with that. And that's okay. Whereas before it was like, oh my God, I would hear somebody say something. I still do this though. I can still hear somebody say something to me and then be like, oh my God, like my kid gets activated. That must be true. But to notice more and more now, I'm like, wow, I don't really agree with that. And that's okay. I don't have to speak out on it necessarily. I can if I want, but just to notice that. That's how you start to know that you're coming into your own, when you can hear something and go, that's not true for me. I mean, as you listen to these videos and there's stuff I say, if there's things that you're like, that's not my truth. Oh my God, honor that, because we're not cookie cutter and we're all like really independently learning to be more of our authentic self. So it's really important to just kind of just notice and give yourself the space to, is that my truth? Even if it comes out of an authority figure's mouth, because you'll know when that really lands for you. It's like, wow, that's a different thing for me. Maybe for you, that's never been a problem. For me, it was a freaking huge problem. And one other this is independent of this. I heard this yesterday too from some guy that's a motivational speaker, and he was just saying this. And I was like, that is so freaking weird that that's even considered a currency. He goes, oh yeah, I totally agree. And somebody had posted something about a coach that's pretty well-known coach that has been putting a lot of information out there really in support of racial awareness and racial inequality, and especially what's happened in the United States with that, and been putting a lot of stuff like that out there. So this gal had this idea of a way to be helpful about this and approached this person and got back something like, I can't help you with this. You're like, basically, no, not at all. And she was like, whoa, not even like, as she was saying, not even saying, hey, God, that's a great idea, not really available. I can't tell you how many times I've seen stuff like that happen. So it was in this thread that what she was talking about, this person's not walking their talk. They're putting all this stuff out there, but behind the scenes, they're not really doing their own work. That is honestly why so often I share my own flaws and foibles, because I think it's important for us to all know we're all in this together. And if we have to live up to some expectation of perfection, and if you're listening to someone and you think you've got to have your shit together and be perfect, it's a problem. So this is what the guy said. He said, yes, I've been hearing this line come around now. Real, R-E-A-L, real is the new currency. And I'm like, WTF? Like, real is the new currency. aren't you just supposed to kind of be that? Like, I just thought, and I told him that, I go, that's just bizarre to me that it's even considered a currency. But I do, and he was saying, yeah, he goes, it's this thing that's being put out there and tagged around in certain, it might be in more of the motivational speaking or maybe some of the upper tier coaching stuff. I really don't know. It's the first time I heard it, but I was like, that's bizarre that real's the new currency. What? Like, I mean, even the thought of somebody be like, did you hear that real's the new currency? Like, we've got to be like, how can we be real with people? It's so interesting. So I got a big kick out of that. And we were sort of bantering back and forth about it. But things like that, when you hear that, you're like, what? It's craziness. So I wanted to share that with you. So if anybody hears that now, real's the new currency, I'd be curious your takes on it as well. Kim, great to see you. Dawn, Christine, that's who I can see that's here. Looks like there's a few more people here, but that's whose names are appearing. Great to see you all, and let's keep it real. Bye for now.